Which is worse? To have your greatest failure exposed to the entire world, or to carry it alone where no one can see it? The Puritans in the Scarlet Letter believe they understand shame. They are so confident in that belief that they build an entire punishment around it. A woman commits adultery. The crime cannot remain private. She's brought to a scaffold in the center of town. The community gathers below her. She stands there holding her infant child, and on the front of her dress, they place a bright red letter. A. Adulteress. The symbol is not temporary. Hester Prynne must wear it for the rest of her life. Every person she passes in the street will see the letter before they see her. The logic behind the punishment is simple. If a person's sin is exposed, if the sinner must live under the constant judgment of the community, then the shame will eventually break them. Public humiliation, in this view, is morally corrective. The sinner will feel the pressure of the community's disapproval and be forced into repentance. Expose the sin, mark the sinner, restore moral order. But Hawthorne spends the rest of the novel quietly demonstrating that the Puritans are wrong. In fact, he constructs the story almost like a controlled experiment. Two people commit the same sin. One of them is publicly exposed. The other remains hidden. Then Hawthorne lets the consequences unfold. Hester Prynne lives under the first condition. Her shame is public. The Scarlet Letter guarantees that every interaction she has with the world passes through the symbol on her chest. Strangers stare. Children mock her. People whisper when she walks by. At first, the punishment works exactly as intended. Hester becomes isolated. She moves to the edge of town. The community treats her as a living warning about sin. But something happens that the Puritans did not anticipate. Hester survives. And over time, survival turns into something stranger. She adapts. Day after day, year after year, she walks through the town wearing the letter meant to humiliate her. She supports herself and her daughter through her skill with a needle. She cares for the sick. She helps the poor. She performs small acts of quiet usefulness that the community cannot easily dismiss. The letter never disappears. The shame never becomes pleasant. But the psychological structure of her life changes, because the worst thing she has done is already visible. The secret is already out. There is nothing left to hide. And when a person no longer has to spend energy concealing their failure, something unexpected happens. The exhausting tension between appearance and reality disappears. Hester does not need to pretend she is innocent. The letter has already told the truth. In a strange way, the punishment simplifies her life. The town can condemn her if it wants, but there is no second version of Hester waiting to be exposed. She is only one person. Meanwhile, another character lives under the exact opposite condition. Arthur Dimmesdale is the town's minister. The community reveres him. They see him as a man of unusual spiritual purity, a moral guide, a living example of righteousness. But Dimmesdale carries the same guilt Hester does. He is Pearl's father. Unlike Hester, his sin remains hidden. No letter marks his clothing. No symbol exposes his crime. The town continues to treat him as a model of virtue. At first glance, it appears that Dimmesdale has escaped the punishment Hester must endure. But Hawthorne slowly reveals the cost of that escape, because Dimmesdale's shame has nowhere to go. He cannot confess without destroying the identity the town has built around him. But he cannot live honestly while that identity remains intact. So the gap between who he is and who the town believes him to be widens every day. And slowly, that gap begins to hollow him out. Hester carries a mark on her clothing. Dimmesdale carries a fracture inside his identity. Hester is one person. Dimmesdale must live as two. There is the public version of him, the admired minister, the moral authority, the man the town trusts to guide their souls. And there's the private version of him, the man who knows the truth about Pearl. Those two versions cannot be reconciled. So the performance continues. Dimmesdale preaches sermons about sin that terrify his congregation with their intensity. The townspeople interpret this as evidence of his spiritual depth, but Hawthorne allows us to see what they cannot. The sermons are not acts of spiritual leadership. They are acts of desperation. Dimmesdale is trying to confess without actually confessing. He fasts. He keeps midnight vigils. He scourges himself in private. None of it works. Because the real problem is not guilt. The real problem is division. Dimmesdale cannot live as the man the town believes him to be, but he cannot survive the destruction of that illusion. So he remains trapped between the two. And slowly, the strain begins to destroy him. The irony becomes impossible to ignore. The woman publicly marked as a sinner becomes psychologically stronger over time. The man whose reputation remains intact becomes fragile, which suggests that the Puritans misunderstood shame at a very basic level. They believed shame was destructive because it came from the outside. The community looks at you. The community judges you. The community humiliates you. But Hawthorne suggests something far more dangerous. The most destructive shame may not be the shame everyone can see. It may be the shame that cannot be seen at all. The shame that forces a person to live inside a lie. One self for the world, another self buried underneath. And there is one character in the novel who constantly exposes that buried truth. Pearl. Pearl is often described as a symbol of sin, but she behaves more like a living accusation. She refuses to cooperate with the town's illusion about Dimmesdale. She studies him carefully. She asks unsettling questions. She seems instinctively aware that something about the town's beloved minister does not make sense. Late in the novel, Hester, Pearl, and Dimmesdale stand together on the scaffold at night while the town sleeps. For a moment, the truth exists. Mother, father, child. But the darkness protects Dimmesdale from the consequences of that truth. Pearl asks him a simple question. Will he stand with them on the scaffold the next day, in the daylight, where everyone can see? Dimmesdale refuses, and Pearl immediately withdraws from him. The gesture is small, but it reveals something essential. Pearl does not respond to private remorse. She responds only to public truth. As long as Dimmesdale keeps his secret, she will not recognize him as her father. Because until the truth is spoken openly, the man she sees in front of her does not actually exist. By the time the novel reaches its climax, the difference between the two conditions Hawthorne created is unmistakable. Hester, the woman publicly shamed, has learned how to endure. Dimmesdale, the man the town reveres, can barely endure himself. Finally, after years of concealment, Dimmesdale climbs the scaffold in daylight. He calls Hester and Pearl to stand beside him, and at last, he speaks the truth. He acknowledges Pearl as his daughter. For the first time in the entire novel, the two versions of his life collapse into one. Pearl kisses him. For the entire story, she has kept her distance from him, as if she senses something incomplete in his character. But the moment the truth is spoken aloud, the tension disappears. The lie collapses. And almost immediately afterward, Dimmesdale dies, which leaves us with a deeply uncomfortable conclusion. The Puritans believed the Scarlet Letter would destroy Hester Prynne. But Hawthorne's experiment suggests something else. Public shame attacks reputation. Hidden shame attacks identity. Hester loses her reputation. Dimmesdale loses himself. And Hawthorne leaves us with a question the Puritans never asked. What is actually worse? To live in the open as a known sinner, or to spend your entire life protecting the illusion that you are not? The Puritans believed exposure was the punishment. Hawthorne may have believed it was the escape.